testing. I hope the audio is working. Okay, this is my third platform that I'm trying to go live on. Um, was having some issues um, with the streaming service, and then I was having issues on my laptop trying to get on to YouTube proper. And ultimately, I've gone to my phone. I think the audio is actually better. I think that the audio is better on my laptop, but I couldn't get it to work. I'm just going to do one tester to make sure that it is. I'm going to make sure that I can be heard. Lord knows I have recorded entire videos. Um, I have recorded videos and they ultimately they weren't being shown. Like you guys couldn't hear anything. Um, so let me just check and see if I can be heard. I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm going to check myself. Go to my channel on my laptop and see if I'm indeed live. Okay, I see that I'm live. Let me see if I click on it. Testing, testing. If I'm indeed live. Yay! Okay, I can be heard because I heard myself. Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to put that down. And now I'm going to, I wanted to share a few thoughts and things that I'm thinking about in terms of what I'm seeing in the financial sector and things that you might want to also look out for as well. And in a broader context, I have I have a desire to share. I have a desire to encourage people to watch everywhere that your money is being siphoned away from you. And sometimes it's not those big amounts of money that keeps the system the way it is. It's little bitty fees and, surcharges and, paying more just because of where you live or paying more for convenience. It's all of those things that really extract wealth from the individual, from the family, and from the community. And I'm all for business. I've been a business owner before in my life. I mean, to some degree, I still have my business, even though I'm not operating it at 100% as I used to. But I'm all for business. I'm all for competition. I'm all for innovation. I love all of that and welcome it. I think we live in a climate where if you criticize the economy or the financial system or the way that the country is being run or the social system, the caste system, if you criticize that, you're automatically put into this category of being a communist or a socialist or you don't like free markets, you don't like capitalism, you don't like um you don't like for the market to move and everybody has a chance to be rich one day. I really have been having a lot of private thoughts about this, thoughts that I've held for a very long time and have evolved as I've gotten older and I've been able to observe more things, as I've been able to, just experience more things and they've become more refined, I feel, over time. And I feel like a lot of these ideals, stand the test of time as far as maybe there was a hint of just like rebellion, like being in my 20s and just like wanting to be like topple down capitalism and all of that. And I think that that was very appropriate for the time being in my 20s, which is why I feel very confident and comfortable enacting whatever political, demonstration or not doing anything at all, sitting in my home. I feel fine about it because I really paid my dues. I've marched, I petitioned, I went to Capitol Hill, I've lobbied on an international level, a local level, a state level, a national level. I made phone calls. I got out the vote. I registered people to vote. Did protest, I mean, sit-ins and all of that. Unions. I mean, I did all of that, in my 20s. And now I have a different contribution to community, to society, to um, my fellow humans on this journey with me. I really feel like I have another path or another role. And the biggest role is like I'm raising a child, and I'm raising her to be a good person, a good citizen, and that's an amazing contribution. That's an amazing contribution, I feel, to get her from infancy into adulthood in one piece, healthy, whole, and sane, and ready to, be a part of a greater community. That's my main focus right now, and other things along the way. But that's really my main focus, and I feel good about it. I feel I'm at peace. I've done my work. My work is going to transform, and I know I'll have to figure out what that work is. But, you know, there's a lot of things that I'm seeing that concern me. And I think that we're just living in a time whereby we are bombarded. We are we are under siege, really. This country is under siege. Um the every like the Constitution, everything that this country has been built upon is under siege. The rule of law is under siege. We're living in a times where, I mean, politicians have always lied to us, but they're just lying in a more brazen way. Like, you know, you could be looking at the sky is purple, and they will get on television and tell you the sky is green because I said it was, and so said it was, and the sky is green. And it just kind of like mind F's you a bit. Like, up is down, down is up. These are like the craziest times that I never imagined living in. And I think that because we're being under siege and bombarded from every aspect, all these institutions being dismantled and undermined um, simultaneously, it's almost like a blitz. You really don't know where to focus. The Department of Education right now is being dismantled. The next big thing that's going to happen, which a lot of wealthy people are going to be affected, is they're removing special education from the Department of Education. No, excuse me. I believe they're removing it from, yeah, I think it's going from Department of Education to the Department of Justice, to the Justice Department. So all of the rights that special education children have under the 504, under these types of laws, your entitlement to an IEP, your entitlement to accommodations inside of the classroom, accommodations in front of the school, your right. Like, for example, let's say you have a child that's in a wheelchair and they can't get on the school bus. Well, federal law says that every single public school is mandated to have a way to get your child on that bus. They have to transport your child safely to and from school. They have to be granted equal opportunity as every other child who's able-bodied who doesn't need a wheelchair. Well, guess what? That's in the process of getting removed from one department into another. And that's going to affect everybody. And I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, let's say you've got a little change on you. Let's say you make like $2 million a year, right? Okay, so you got a little money on you. Now, you might be making $2 million a year, but you're also living in an area that's super expensive, right? Because people who make $2 million a year don't want to live in a lower middle class neighborhood. They want to live in an upper class middle neighborhood. So that means still, no matter where you live, a large chunk of your money is going to be going on your housing, it's going to be going on your transportation, your food, your health care, etc. Everybody has those costs. And as you move up the social, ladder those housing costs start to climb. So a lot of those wealthy people in between the like $300,000 range to like the $2 million range, what they do, because if you're making $2 million a year or less, you can't afford private school. So, especially if you have more than one child. So, what those people do a lot of times is they move to an affluent neighborhood that has a good school district. And that's kind of like, I can't do private school, but I can do the next best thing. And if for that demographic of people who have special needs children, um, they are entitled to those accommodations. Now, private schools are exempt from providing special education services to children. Now, many private schools offer them on an ad hoc basis, on a needs basis, or if the parent has extra money to pay for an aide or to pay for the services that their child needs within that private school, then they offer it. Or there may be a specific private school or even a nonprofit private school that's specifically for a certain type of a disability. You might have a school for the deaf or a school for the blind or a school for some other, those with cerebral palsy or, like mobility issues. Sometimes you have those specialty schools, but they're random and sprinkled out and they're not widely prolific, among the education sector. Those are like specialized schools. For the most part, most like religious private schools, regular private schools, even charter schools have limited um, special education resources because they just don't have the budget. Because if you think about it, like how does the money get funded to the public school, to the charter school? Well, that money is being siphoned out of the district. So it's being taken out of the main pool and siphoned off to this charter school. And that charter school is usually run by a company. Well, the company have to take their cut. So the district has already taken their cut. And supposedly they're going to like, provide some type of like specialized, education, whether it be Montessori or another. But oftentimes it doesn't really compete with the main public schools. Oftentimes charter schools don't, meaningfully offer anything special or upgraded from the regular public school. But nonetheless, so they have less money. I say all that to say they have less money in a charter school than a regular public school because the company running the charter school takes a cut off. Not to mention, you don't get the economies of scale that you get with the public school district. So the public school district is buying, 10,000 milks and 10,000 oranges and, 10,000 books, and they're getting that bulk discount. Well, the private school is, pardon me, the charter school, whether it be one school or a series of schools, they're maybe buying 1 to 5 items. So they're paying a premium. They're not getting that bulk discount that you get with a larger school. So that's why they have less money and they don't have as much money for special education. They just don't. And oftentimes they'll tell you like now since charter schools are still public, they have to offer testing and accommodations, but they are not going to be as robust as that what you would find in a larger district public school. So I say all that to say everyone who has children in the public school district who has children with special needs are going to be negatively affected by what they're doing at the Department of Education and the Department of Justice. There will be less protections, less entitlements, and less mandatory accommodations available for all children, rich, poor, black, white, brown, yellow, everybody will be receiving less. And I think that people voting, like they're voting for their racism, they don't think that they're hurting their own children. They're not looking in the pipeline to see what does gutting the Department of Education really mean for me? What does it really mean for my children in the future? A lot of people are not thinking about that. And it's not even something that's all the way fully, like, it's not even all the way activated yet. It's in the pipeline. It's on its way and it's going to affect millions of people. And I promise you, these rich people high income, I'll call them high income people who moved to affluent and upper middle class neighborhoods, who moved because of the school district, and they're taking advantage of everything in that school district. They are going to be crying tattooed tears when they realize that their children's rights are being ripped away from them. You better believe they have children on the spectrum. They have children with ADHD. They have children with mobility issues, uh, different things. They have them, you know, sensory processing issues, all kinds of stuff. They have those children. They are abundant. Those children are abundant in affluent neighborhoods. And what they're going to learn sooner or later is that voting for your racism, voting for misogyny has crippled your children, because now you're going to have to give up your country club membership. You're going to have to give up this, that, and the third if you want to pay for the specialized education services that you used to be entitled to. Let that sink in. Anyway, they're going to learn. They're going to learn. They are going to learn. All right. So I didn't want to talk about that, but I brought that up because I'm making this point that there's just so much going on that it's hard to pay attention to what's going on. And there's a lot of, I haven't really heard like in the, what I would call the, I guess you would call it like the opposition. I guess you would call it the opposition discord discussion. Those are who are in opposition of like this fascist regime. I haven't really heard people talking about what's going on in banking and finance. And I'm not even like, I'm not criticizing it either, because pick your poison. You can literally turn around in a 360, make a complete 360 and just imagine that there's problems all around you. Just point to one, and if you just start talking about it and you just go off on a tangent about it, there's no shortage of problems. There's no shortage of crises. There's no shortage of carnage, of like deterioration of the rule of law, sinking into what could be the next financial crisis, like in the lights of like the Great Depression. Like we're at that point where everything is being held on by like a string. So I'm not criticizing it. I'm just noticing that I don't really hear people talking about it. I'm going to tell you about a personal situation that I've been monitoring for maybe the past 6 months, and how I've come to a conclusion that I've come to about what I'm going to do personally with my own money. And then I'll kind of expound about like what I feel is happening very quietly for the most part. Okay, so I have been observing over the last 6 months, especially like leading up to this SpaceX IPO, I have been observing my personal bank, Morgan Stanley. I have been seeing them uh, advertise investments like the IPO of SpaceX to retail investors such as myself. Now, how did I get here? I ended up at Morgan Stanley through about 3 or 4 acquisitions. Okay, this has been a long journey, and we're talking over 20 years. Not with Morgan Stanley, with the predecessor companies that have been acquired and over, like over 20 years. So I was with this European company. They got acquired by an American company. They got acquired by another American company. And then ultimately, Morgan Stanley acquired E-Trade. And here I am today. And, I just kept the one account for a really long time because I'd had it for such a long time. I am a Taurus and I am a creature of habit. And so I just didn't want to move. I didn't want to move the account. It was a brokerage account, and I think I had another account. I just didn't want to move it. right? Oh, actually, I think they siphoned off I had like a CD. I think they siphoned that off to a different company. And then I ended up rolling that into, I don't remember. I ended up rolling that particular product into another banking system. But with my brokerage account, I'd had it for so long, I just decided to keep it with them. So, the history of this particular demographic of the company is what I would call retail investors. These are people who open up their own brokerage accounts and they trade. I mean, I feel like E-Trade back in the day, like they really revolutionized um, trading without first of all, you trading yourself, right? So like back in the day, in like the 70s and the 80s, you would have to call up a broker, tell them what you want to buy, or if they were selling something, they would call you and they would like do almost like a telemarketing and calling and selling securities. And then we had this whole regulation um, because retail investors were losing their life savings because of broker dealers were not honest, the securities were not vetted, people were not understanding, there were not proper disclosures, just a whole history of how the regulations that we have came into be. We have self-regulating entities like FINRA, then you have the SEC, um, and other regulatory bodies that try to keep the the market stable so that we don't have another crash like of the 1920s, and that we don't have retail investors losing their life savings like what was happening in the 70s. Um, so as a retail investor, you really only have access to securities that are public securities, meaning they've gone through, registering with the SEC. The company has to report their earnings. There's supposed to be transparency. There's supposed to be, even to get on the markets, you've got like the NASDAQ, you've got the New York Stock Exchange, you've got other stock exchanges, you have international stock exchanges. But even to get on these exchanges, this particular security, so like let's say a company is selling a bond or a, um, they're selling stock in their company, even to get to be listed is another, eye of scrutiny to where like, is this a viable company? Is this a legitimate security whereby like retail investors can invest? Because retail investors, at the average Jane and Joe, you don't have a due diligence committee. You don't have the ability to research. You don't have the ability to run models on companies. You don't have the ability to like necessarily, or even the time to read through all the financial statements and really deduce if is this company legitimate, or even the knowledge base to do it. Most retail investors don't do that. Even like people who are investors by proxy because of their 401ks and IRAs don't necessarily have the time to do that. So the government, these regulatory bodies and the markets are supposed to be protecting Jane and Jill, the average investor, that the companies that they put on these exchanges in the public market are supposed to be legitimate. Now, can you lose money in investments? Yes, you can. Even if a company is registered with the SEC and da 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 da, it's still an investment, meaning you can lose your money. But they're not supposed to be having junk on there, is what I'm saying. They're not supposed to be having junk. And they're not supposed to be having things that are so speculative and unproven. Um, but we're living in this time, and that's why I titled this video like Unregulated. We're living in a time of unprecedented deregulation. We're living in a time where regulation is under attack, and every person, every CEO, every like hedge fund guy, every finance company that was always within the lines of the regulation, but they would butt up against the line, like they would push things to the limit. They smell blood, and they feel like if there's ever a time that we're going to push past regulations, that we're going to release bullshit out into the public, that we're going to scam the everyday average American. Now is the time to do it because guess what? These people have also paid for their pardon. That's another thing that people have to realize. People are operating, including financiers, they're operating with a level of impunity. They're operating with a level of who's going to check me, boo? It's not going to be the Department of Justice. Who's there? Todd Blanche? You think he won't indict anybody that's paying him or his boss? So they know that they're not going to be pursued by the Department of Justice. The IRS and the SEC have been fund wise, um, they've been gutted. A lot of the very smart mathematicians and accountants and PhDs and, career government people that were at the SEC and the IRS, well, they've been let go. They've been fired. They've been forced to retire. And they've been appointing or somehow finagling a way for incompetent people, people who are morally compromised, to be in these positions. Like, who's out here protecting the average American and their 401ks and their investments and even the money in their bank? Because we look at this thing like the FDIC, this like insurance, like if anything happens and there's a run on the bank, which we did see in Silicon Valley Bank a few years ago. If there's a run on the bank, okay, you have $250,000 that will be backed up by the federal government. Well, I'm a realist. I try not to be like a doom and gloom person, but to be very honest, with the devaluing of the dollar, inflation, global geopolitical issues, big bondholders like US bondholders like Japan, France, Germany that are becoming shaky about the US market. Canada, big bondholder, big trade partner, has been alienated and threatened by this rogue regime. This affects everybody. I mean, people would like to think that, oh well, that's on an international level, it's not a bit, like I just want to like have my job and like do my thing. But it's all interconnected. We rely Part of the reason why the dollar is as strong as it is because there are these large bondholders. There are people that invest in the US. Um, the biggest thing that the US has to sell is stability, but we don't have stability right now. We have random wars popping up out of nowhere in 2026. When did they do the coup in Venezuela? I'm trying to think if that was 2026 or 2025. But like right now, you know, I mean, I remember reading about this stuff when I was in college, studying Latin American affairs and hearing about like the Panamanian invasion. And when I had gone to Panama, speaking to people who remembered the Panamanian invasion, uh, stuff like that, like, I I read about those things, people talked about like historical facts about those things, like, you know, coups in Venezuela and coups in Argentina and coups in Chile and people being disappeared and all of that. And it's like, wow, in 2026, we're right back at all of that again, where you got people going in and taking heads of state out of the country with no due process, not involving the International Court of Law, like just vigilantism, just like this is just mind blowing. Oh God, I just have to take a breath. That's a lot. This is like this is not a bad dream. Like I'm not even living in a nightmare. Like this is really what's happening in this world. And like I talked to some of my friends. Remember, I was talking to one of my friends. She happens to be a doctor, and she was just kind of like, "Yeah, let's go to happy hour," and she's just having a good old grand old time. And we're talking, and I started to get into some of this, and she's just looking at me like I can tell she doesn't she doesn't watch the news. She's like in blissful, uh, you know, ignorance of what's going on. But I can't help but to just stay informed about what's going on, and it's shocking. Of course, not the mainstream news, but just like people who are actually reporting on what's going on. It's shocking, and it just feels like waking up into a nightmare every day. So yeah, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. We are all interconnected as far as like the strength of the dollar, and that affects everybody's investments. I remember talking about trying to avoid like a global crash. Um, yes, so the grifters, these CEOs and these like leaders of companies and institutions who are not honest, they have no integrity. Um, it's like a race to the bottom. I think for some people, they are genuinely just like greedy monsters. And I think sometimes people do wrong because they think they don't want to be left behind. It's one of those things where you're like, well, everybody's taking steroids. I don't want to take steroids, but if I want to compete, I have to take them. I don't want to cheat on my test, but everybody's cheating. I don't want to be the last in line. I don't want to be at the bottom of the class. So I'm going to cheat too. And I feel like we have a lot of that going on where companies, it's like a race to moral depravity. They don't want to be left out. So if other people are cooking the books, they're going to cook the books. If other people are skimming off the top, they're going to skim off the top. We have very little people who are willing to stand up and have integrity, not because they are being forced to, but because it's coming from within them. Like they will not sleep well at night knowing they're scamming Americans. They will not, like, they just have like their own internal moral compass. That is like a luxury. That's like a rarity these days to find. And they do it. I know at least one. I know at least one, like leader of like a really, really huge company that like has a moral compass. So I'm not gonna say they don't exist. I'm just saying like it just feels like a very rare find. So back to Morgan Stanley. I'm seeing them advertise things to retail investors that make me say, it just seems uh suspect to me. Um, One thing that I noticed, and my biggest frustration with them, because I bank with them and I also have like investment accounts with them as well. One thing I've always been disappointed with their banking services. Like from the jump, I've always been disappointed with them. I mean, like if I need a new debit card, it will take me like 2 weeks to get it, which is effing insane, right? Because most of the time you can just go to your local branch and get a debit card that same day or get one sent like the next 2, 3 days. Their customer service feels very useless. Nobody ever knows what they're doing. They don't know up from down. Um, oh God, what else? Um, okay, so even with like charges that are coming through, they don't show you any pending charges. So you literally won't see what you've used, like if you use your debit card or if you initiate an ACH transfer, for example, it doesn't show you that it's a pending transaction. And I can say that for most banking institutions, including credit unions, they've offered that feature for like at least 15 years. This is not some new cutting edge feature to show pending transactions. It has been a standard in banking for years. And Morgan Stanley still doesn't do it. There's a whole bunch of things that their banking system just doesn't provide that every other bank does. Um, Now, when I first got this account, which was over 5 years now, it's been a while. I was like, well, they just acquired this other company. Like, I'm going to give them time to grow. I'm going to give them time to, innovate. Like, what I love about it is no fees. I do not like banking fees. I do not like banking fees. I'm allergic to banking fees. So I like the fact that they're free. no banking fees, and they have a lot of services that a lot of other banks charge for, like wire transfers, and they reimburse all ATM fees, which I like. So that's going on the plus side. But there's just all this technological lag, customer service, it's inept, um, really hard to get services like replacing your debit card. All of those things are difficult and challenging with them. And I could go on. Like there's other grievances. If I think of others, I'll mention them. But my initial thought was, let me give them time. I can honestly tell you, between 2026 and actually, let me see, when did I probably open that account? Well, when did I really start using the account is the question. Um, Maybe 2018-ish, somewhere around there. I started using it because I used to be with this credit union, which I still have my account there, but I don't really use that credit union that much. But it's very hard to switch banks. And that's why so many people don't do it. And that's why like so many people like they'll get in these bad banking relationships and they'll be paying fees out the wazoo and it'll just be absolute insanity. But a lot of times people don't change because it's just, when you use a bank and it's your primary bank, they get so integrated in your life. You've got your checks, you've got your debit cards, you've got your automatic withdrawals, you've got your, all of that stuff. You got your direct deposit from your job or your business going into the account. And it's just so hard to untangle from banks. And banks know this. They most certainly know it. And that's why a lot of times, they have those entry rate, giveaways and blah, 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 because they know they're going to make all that money back off of the long term. Because once you get with them, the likelihood of you switching banks, it's just a hard sell to switch away. So I had the account for much longer than I actually started using it because it was hard for me to get untangled from the credit union. But the credit union pissed me off. I don't remember what they did, but I was just like, F y'all. I'm tired of this, that, and the third. I think it was like maybe an overdraft fee or something. I don't know. And I was like, I'm going to go with this other company because they don't have overdraft fees. They don't have any fees at all. They reimburse all ATM fees, and I'm going to go with them. And I've already got the account. It's just a matter of using the account, actually starting to use it. So, and so I did. But I can honestly say that between 2018, 2019, and 2026, which is actually closer to 10 years, there have been no major technological upgrades in this account. It continues to lag behind basic services that you would expect from a bank in 2026. So it's like, I'm filing that away, right? Then the IPO for SpaceX comes. Morgan Stanley is shoving this crap down the customer's throat. I'm observing all of this and I'm taking it in. I'm observing, Morgan Stanley has to be incentivized to do this. They wouldn't just be shoving this down retail investors' throats. And like everybody knows, SpaceX is a piece of shit. And so it's really like, okay, who's willing to go there? Who's willing to put their neck out for this crappy product? And it just pained me and disappointed me immensely that Morgan Stanley was willing to put their neck on the line. That it pains me that, was it NASDAQ? I think NASDAQ was willing to list them publicly on the market. And that just disappointed me as well. I think they were rejected from the New York Stock Exchange, if I'm not incorrect. I think it was NASDAQ that took them. And they wanted to be, I think, at the NASDAQ 500 or 100, but like they wanted to be like in the like top, fund, or right, like the top rankings based on, what do they base that on? Do they base that on, I think they base that on, there's a specific term and I'm sorry, it's escaping me at the moment. It's not capital. And it's not shares. Sorry. If I remember it, I'll put it in the comments. But there's a specific like number that would grant a company into this like small, like, the top NASDAQ 100, top NASDAQ 250, NASDAQ 500. And I want to say New York Stock Exchange was like, yeah, no, you don't meet the qualifications, but NASDAQ would let them. And I know the reason that SpaceX really wanted to get into that particular fund, well, it's not a fund per se, it's a ranking, but there are many companies that build funds around this ranking. Does that make sense? So Fidelity, for example, will have like Fidelity NASDAQ 100 or and it'll be like whatever that company is, they'll index that fund to meet that what's on the market. Does that make so you have like the S&P 500. Like that isn't a fund per se, but there will be companies that will build a fund around the S&P 500. So that'll be like the top companies, those are your Googles, your Apples, your State Farms, like your really big companies are in that S&P 500. They're in that fund. I mean, they're in that group. And then companies like Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, um, they will create a fund around the S&P 500. And so if you're like, well, I want to invest in the S&P 500, but I'm an average retail investor, I have $100, but I want to invest in the S&P 500. Well, you can go to a company like Schwab or Fidelity and Vanguard, and you can buy 100. It's pretty much a mutual fund. You can get a mutual fund or you can get an ETF based off of those top 500 companies. And the company, Fidelity, for example, would be considered the fund manager, and they could launch well, they have them already. They have mutual funds or an ETF based off of that ranking within the S&P 500. So when you buy $100 worth of shares of that mutual fund, you've bought into the S&P 500 because they're going to divvy up like the $100 that you have. You own a percentage of the mutual fund, and the mutual fund itself is invested in the S&P 500. Okay. So SpaceX wants to get into this ranking because they want to be in those types of funds, and they want to be in your 401k. And they know the best way to get into 401ks and to get in those types of funds is to have that particular ranking. And so I'm just disappointed with everybody who's supposed to be looking out for the average investor that just like sold bullshit to the average investor. That pisses me off. And I have some like cleaning up and like vigilance to do. I know like one of my funds, because I really didn't even want to be in NVIDIA, to be honest with you. And one of my funds, I have like a little bit of NVIDIA, but it's like immaterial. So I wasn't like freaking out about it. But like I'm very adamant, I don't want to participate in SpaceX at all. SpaceX has gotten to this point where they've tapped out private investors. No institutions, and when I say institutions, I mean like big endowments, big foundations, pension plans, retirement plans, like not the individual mom and pop 401ks or 401ks that are like handled by like smaller companies, but like those bigger retirement plans, like the state of California workers. That's a big plan. You know what I mean? You're talking billions of dollars. Um, teachers' retirement funds and stuff like that. Firemen's, a lot of and firemen and police officers still have pensions. They're one of the last few industries that still have a pension. And it's partially because of the line of work. It's a very dangerous line of work, and it's easier to attract talent if you can guarantee them like yes, it's a dangerous work being a police officer, being a firefighter, being a paramedic, but you're going to get this pension. So that's one of the few industries that many of the cities and governments and stuff still offer a pension to. Okay. So if you have like the firefighters of New York or New Jersey or whatever, that's a big pension plan. Like I said, you're talking billions of dollars. Um, Investment for university systems are also huge institutional investors, like the University of, Texas Endowment and like, and they're the what they use to finance like capital improvements, scholarships, uh, research. I think like one of the biggest private funds in the world is Yale, I think. Yale or Harvard, one of them. Like their endowment, literally, their endowment is so big, like nobody has to pay tuition. So I don't even know why. I'm not certain why they charge tuition, but they do. But like their endowment is so large. It's like the size of a small country. They could literally, everybody could go for free and they would still not lose money. That's how big the endowment is. So when I say institutional investor, that's what I'm talking about. Me, I am a retail investor. I am a small, $100 here, $50 there investor. Institutional investors like Yale, Harvard, the firefighters of New York, whatever the case may be, they have accountants. They have a due diligence committee, multiple layers. They have attorneys. They have researchers. Um, they have all of these people that look into investments before they make them. So institutions like that, they are able to make riskier investments because they can absorb the risk. They make decisions that are pre-thought out. Like they don't just like do stuff based off of what they feel and after reading a few articles, which is what most retail investors do. Most retail investors are not going to spend 3 months researching a company before they buy a stock. I mean, let's be honest. We would like to believe, even myself, I'd like to kid myself and say, I'm going to do all this research. I don't do 3 months of investigation before I make a purchase. I pretty much go off of my gut. I'm like, oh yeah, I feel good about that company. I'm going to buy it. Oh, it's a publicly traded company. I feel good about it. I'm going to buy it. And I like, going with like funds I trust. I look more so at the fund manager. Like who's managing that fund at Fidelity? What is their track record? I would look more into the fund manager than I would look in the underlying investments within the fund because I don't have the time. I don't have a team. It's just me investing at night on my computer in my spare time. So, and that's what a lot of retail investors do. And because of that difference between an institutional investor and retail investors from a government perspective should have more protection. Like retail investors shouldn't even have access to junk companies. If Harvard or Yale wants to make a risky investment, it's on them. They've got a whole team of people that have said, you know what, we know this is really risky, but we feel like the benefit will, outweigh the da 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 da. And they also mitigate their risk. They have different things that they can do to mitigate their risk. They have attorneys that can write up special contracts and provisions for them to get out of stuff and, options that they can purchase to stop their losses. They have all kinds of things that they can do to protect themselves that the average retail investor don't have access to. Okay, so let me circle it back to Morgan Stanley. Okay, so I see Morgan Stanley doing this, and I see the banking system continuing to be crappy after all these many years. And I've come to this conclusion. They don't care about the banking system. And, pretty much with the banking system, they just needed more cheap access to capital. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And, I've seen this with like other companies, especially um, in my local area, where they have like holdings groups, and the holding groups will have like a securities company, they'll have a banking company, and another type of financial company, and they will create agreements between the bank and the securities company can borrow money from the bank at extremely low rates and then turn around and make money off of that money. And they don't have to raise as much capital because it's like you know there's one of two ways to get the money. You're going to borrow the money or you're going to raise the capital. That's pretty much it, or you're going to use your own capital. But those are the two major ways of like getting money: borrowing or raising the capital from investors, you know. And so from the securities side, they would have less work to do if they can borrow the money from the bank at an extremely low rate. And I really I've just come to the conclusion like that's really what it's all about. Like, if you guys are not taking the banking seriously, because if you were taking the banking seriously, you would have innovated by now. You would have you would have done so many things to make things better for the consumer. You would be competing with banks that are more traditional banks. Because truth be told, it's like Morgan Stanley is like an investment bank with like appendages. They are an investment bank with appendages. And like these other divisions are not as robust. I'm sure they like to grow them. And then they have this appendage of the bank. But the bank is great for them because they can borrow money very cheaply. But my thing is, I don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of issues because, like, we have this big law. I'm so sorry, y'all, that I am not able to quote the exact law. I'm going to blame it on I'm sleepy. But, like, I think it's the Banking Act, but don't quote me on it. But there was like this regulation that separated securities from banks. And this was to protect the consumer's cash. You're not supposed to intermingle investment funds with banking funds. The banking funds are supposed to be secure for the depositor, whereas the people who are investing on the security side, they know that they're accepting risk. They know that they're accepting risk, but the people on the banking side are thinking that they have no risk or minimal risk because they're depositing their money into the account. They want the money to be safe in that account until they withdraw the money. There was a whole lot of shenanigans, and that's why we have Chase and Morgan Stanley. They had to separate because it was the biggest bank in the world, and they had to separate. So Morgan Stanley separated, and it became the investment bank, and Chase became the retail bank that we know all today. But that's because of that law that passed. Well, guess what? Think because of like the different administrations we've had, God bless Obama. I love me some Obama and I miss him. But he was not tough on bankers. He bailed the bankers out. He let them run roughshod. He let them run amok, to be perfectly honest. And the separations that had been established to separate securities investment banking from retail banking and deposits and withdrawals, they are starting to erode. And you have these companies like a Morgan Stanley that opens up a banking division. And they figured out after all this time how to create loopholes to where they're doing some of the same shit that they were doing back in the day when all those people lost all their money in the bank. Now, it's still not supposed to be commingled, but like I said, it's not as black and white as it used to be. It's starting to become gray. They're starting to become gray area. They're starting to become all these like loopholes that they're doing. I'm losing confidence in Morgan Stanley. I've lost so much confidence in them that I am going to be actively figuring out how to detangle myself from the banking sector. And to be frank, I don't even trust them with my security account at this point because I saw more advertising from them. First, okay, first I saw advertising for cryptocurrency, not just Bitcoin, but other bullshit cryptocurrency. That for me is a pause. That for me is a pause. Now, from a business perspective, there are going to be customers I feel that are gung ho about cryptocurrency. And I don't think that you, me, or anybody else can convince them that it's bullshit and it's an illusion. They're going to be into it no matter what. And they're going to want to maybe custody. I don't, it's not, see, it's like cryptocurrency is so weird because it's like, it's not a real security, but it's not currency either. So it's like, what are you doing? Like, are you custodying it here? Are you opening up a bank account and having it here? I don't even know how they categorize it, but they want it accounted for in their like overall portfolio. And I feel like if you are a brokerage and you have customers that are like, I have this cryptocurrency, like I want you to hold it for me, or I want you to include it in my portfolio, I think you should accommodate those customers, right? You don't want to lose their business. And if they're gung ho about it, then give them a way to hold their cryptocurrency on your platform. I have no problem with that. Again, I am not an anti business communist. I am a practical, free thinking person. I don't have an issue with that. Okay. But if you're pushing cryptocurrency, which is bullshit, onto retail investors, I have a problem with that. And I expect better from a company like a Morgan Stanley. Now, when it comes to pushing cryptocurrency bullshit, when I go onto YouTube and, free webinar, sign up for my cryptocurrency class, I'm going to teach you how to be a cryptocurrency boss, join my cryptocurrency mastermind. I expect that stuff from grifters, from scammers, from people that's trying to make a quick buck off of people. I expect that fully from them. People that do pump and dumps and all that type of shit. I expect that from them. But a company like a Morgan Stanley should have higher integrity. They shouldn't be pushing and selling it to retail investors. It is bullshit. So I'm observing this. I'm observing this. And there's just so many things that's causing me to give them the side eye. Like, okay, we are in this time of deregulation. We're in this time where grifting is at an all-time high. We're at a time where we still have some laws on the books when it comes to no commingling of funds and protecting investors and, how you're supposed to do your valuations and your accounting and things like that. But there's nobody to prosecute it right now because every all of a lot of the fraud investigations that were from the previous administration, when Trump got in office, he didn't pursue them. Either they're on hold or they're dismissed or they're just not picking up the file. People, big companies, wealthy people who were in the process of being audited, those audits stopped. No progress is being made on them. So we're living in this time whereby the government is not going to stop you from doing wrong. Only you will stop yourself from doing wrong at that level, in that space. And I don't purport to know what's going on behind the scenes. I have no idea. I'm looking at what I'm receiving. I'm looking at what I see being pushed towards certain people, and I am making deductions. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. I'm drawing my own conclusions. based on what I see and looking out for my own best interest. I'm at this place where I don't trust people to look out for me. I feel like I need to look out for myself to the best of my ability. I need to look out for myself. If I can leave you with one encouraging word, please check your statements with a fine tooth comb. So I have my daughter, I gave her like um, you know how they used to have Mint back in the day? I think it was called Mint. Was it called Mint? You know that there was like a free like money conglomerate like account thing where you could like load in all of your accounts and see what's going on and make a budget and all of that stuff, and it was free. I think that that company went out of business. So, but like a competitor company that has a free service as well. And I created that account for my daughter so she can go online. She can see her savings account and um, her checking account, and then I try to show her how to use a budget. You know, when she gets her allowance and deciding like, okay, you're going to give some to charity, you're going to save some money, you're going to buy what you want to buy, and when you buy what you want to buy, you're going to um, when you buy what you want to buy, you're going to document what you spent. You're going to categorize it. Was it restaurant? Was it a toy? Was it a movie ticket? You know, you're going to categorize it. So we check her account yesterday and I see a $5 charge in the checking account and I see a $5 charge in the savings account. Now, I started this live by saying I hate bank fees with a passion. I am allergic to bank fees. I think it's the stupidest thing in the world. I do not believe in paying bank fees. I know that youth accounts are free. There are no service charges on the savings account or the checking account. Now, we had done some transfers in the savings account and they charged us. And I called them and I was like, why did you charge my account? And they said, oh, well, the savings account, you only get so many transfers in the quarter, and that's why we charged you. And I was like, well, it might have been in the fine print, but please excuse me. I did not read the fine print. I read the headlines and I missed that. Like, can you please put the money back in the account? Now that we know, we are not going to make too many transfers out of the savings account because we don't want to pay any fees. And I want you to understand, write that in my account, write that in my notes. This customer does not want to pay any fees. So they put the money back in my account and we've never had that issue again because now I know the rule. So the $5 service fee, I'm like, what the hell is this? So I told my daughter, I'm like, tomorrow we got to call the bank. I said, do you want to go up there or do you want to call? She's like, let's call Mom. I'm like, okay, cool. So this morning when I was taking her to the doctor. I'm like, I want to call him right now. I'm about to call him in the car. Like, I want to get this resolved now. So I call and she was listening to an audiobook and I'm like, turn the audiobook off because I want her, even though I'm the one calling, like I'm the adult on the account. It's her account, but it's a minor account. I'm the primary. She's the minor on the account. I want her to listen to me. I want her to be like mentally checked in to me calling the bank and what kind of questions am I asking? I want her engaged with this process because she's going to have to do this on her own at some point, you know? So I'm like, okay, hang up your audiobook. Like I need for you to like pay attention to this phone call. So I get on the phone, I'm like, what is going like, and the crazy thing is like, I hate when people play dumb, like they don't know what it is. Oh, I don't know, ma'am. Let me look into this. She puts me on hold for a long time. Then she comes back and she's like, well, I do see, well, what day are you talking about? And it's like, man, I know that this lady is playing dumb because it's the last charge on the account. It's impossible to miss. And it's the only $5 service fee on the account. Also impossible to miss. So she's playing dumb. And so I verify it. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Then she puts me on hold for another amount, a long time. Then she comes back and she's like, well, have you moved? I'm like, no. She's like, well, this is a return address fee. I said, what? This is a return address fee. We're trying to send your statement and it returned back. Did you move? I'm like, I'm keeping it together. But long story short, I told this lady, I said, we receive statements every month, for her account at least, which I don't know why we do, because we don't need statements. We get statements online, but they insist on mailing them. Whatever. Your prerogative. If you want to send them by mail, okay. I didn't ask for them. Okay. So you're going to charge me for something I never asked for. And in fact, I told you, I don't need a paper statement. We can get it online. And they were like, well, for our youth accounts, we don't offer digital statements. We only mail them. Okay, fine. If you insist on mailing them, okay, fine, mail them. But I didn't ask for that. So you're charging me $5 for something I didn't ask for. I get the statements every month. I get them, I give them to my daughter. She looks at them and then she shreds them. That's pretty much our routine. She looks at the statement, everything looks fine, she shreds it, and we move on. And it comes every month. The statement for the checking, the statement for the savings. I told the woman, I said, I haven't moved and I receive statements every month. If a statement came back and you are so concerned about it, you could have called or emailed me and asked my address rather than charging me $10. I said, these fees are absurd. And she's like, okay, well, I understand. I said, and I'm like, so I'm going to need you to put that money back in my account. Oh, well, hold on. And she put me on hold for another minute. Then she finally comes back and she's like, well, we have to send it to the branch manager for them to approve it. And hold on while I make the email. And to email the branch manager, I can just tell that they are trying to make this process of me getting my money back so difficult that I just give up. I hang up the phone. I move on. I get distracted on something else. You know, and by the way, this is not Morgan Stanley. This is a local state bank. Okay. And yeah, it's a long story, but I chose this bank because sometimes I get cash. I get cash a lot less than I used to, but sometimes I get cash and I need a place that I can deposit cash. And that's another thing with Morgan Stanley. They don't have any branches. And so if you have cash, there's really nothing you can do with it. Like, you would have to convert that cash to, say, a cashier's check or a money order or some type of way if you want to put the money in Morgan Stanley, which is very annoying. So to just avoid all of that, I just decided to open up a local account in the state for my cash needs mainly. And I was thinking, well, I might also do a safety deposit box with them as well. So this lady, I can just tell she's trying to make things as difficult as possible for me to get the money back. So I say that to say, in this unregulated times, in a time where the economy is precarious, I believe that more people are going to be seeing little ticky-tacky, little like, let me try to do something and hope you don't see it type of situations, and hoping that people are too busy, they're too distracted, they don't have time to check their account, they're not checking their account with a fine-tooth comb, and having little things like that. So please look at your accounts carefully. Look at your accounts carefully and make sure that these institutions are not siphoning money away from you. With this local bank, I don't know. Like, that really pissed me off. I I'm considering closing the accounts. I am. I'm not fully decided on it, but I am considering it. I am considering it. Um, Brokerage with Morgan Stanley, I am going to move that somewhere else. I don't trust them. I just don't. I don't trust them. I'm going to move. Um, the banking, oh man, it's such a pain in the ass to move. Oh man. Yeah, but I got to do it though. I got to do it. I do. I got to do it. I just don't trust them, you know? And I think, like, especially like as if I can get into a different situation where we're talking about a larger amount of money, I definitely wouldn't want it there. I have another credit union that I'm using out of on the West Coast that I like for savings purposes. And from the way I observe the way they do business, I respect the way they do business. And I feel like comfortable having my money there at that credit union. So I'm thinking, for probably for saving vehicles, maybe I could, do more there. And I could also just do research and see if there are any other institutions that can meet my needs. And like if I can get rid of having the local bank and them, that would be great. But I'm really particular about my banking because I don't like the big, I don't like Citi, Bank of America, uh, Wells Fargo. I don't like those big retail like banks like that. I really just don't. I don't like banks that try to turn a profit like that. I just don't. I rather deal with credit unions or local banks that are more built on like relationships than just trying to extract as many fees out of people as possible. So, we'll see. Um, we will see. But it's just, I noticed these things happening simultaneously. And with Morgan Stanley, I've been observing for months the decline. I've been observing, and it has enough things have lined up for me in the negative column to warrant me moving. So I will be doing that. I will be doing that. So thank you for sticking around if you did for this conversation. I feel like it's overdue. There's other things I want to talk about in this realm. That's going to be including these trading markets of like trading, basically like gambling. You know, is it going to rain today? Is it going to be cloudy today? Prediction markets. Yeah, prediction markets. I want to talk about that. Not tonight. I'm tired. In the future, I want to talk about prediction markets. I want to talk about gambling, which is getting out of control. Um, that's like our next big uh that's our next big opioid crisis. Gambling. That's going to be huge. And it's going to affect so many people. It's already affecting a lot of people. Um, but it's very destructive to prediction markets and gambling. Those are those which are, they're kind of one and the same. But the only reason why this prediction markets are really thriving is because of the deregulated environment that we live in. That's the only way that the prediction markets can be even existing right now because it is just unregulated gambling. Prediction markets, they operate in this gray area of like, no, we're investing, but it's not investing. It's just gambling. I mean, and like, yeah, you have options in like securities trading, which is a form of gambling, but that is regulated. And there's contracts. There's actually like options contracts, and that's a whole nother industry, and also a lot of retail investors do not have access to options, and um, they're kind of starting to lax up on it and give more retail investors access to options. But a lot of platforms, they just like, if you're not a very sophisticated investor or you haven't been on the platform for a while and have proven to like have a stable account and not be making risky decisions, a lot of times those options won't even be available. So um yeah, I think that that's something to talk about in the future. And then I'd also like to talk about just like the small things that, like, how I started this conversation off, that siphon wealth away from you and your family and your community. So I think, like, not to provide necessarily individual advice, but I think that it's a conversation worth having on a community level, on a on like on an economic level, right? Like, the reason why we are in the situation that we are in is because there are like a million tactics to separate you from your money before you even have time to think about what you might want to do with your money. Does that make sense? Like, there's already a plan. In other words, there's already a plan to separate you from your money even before you get paid, to where you never get to put your money to work for you. You never get to put your money to work for the betterment of your family because it's being siphoned away in little ticky tacky ways. Always. Even those services where they're like, you can get paid up to 3 days early on your payday, blah, blah, blah. And then and it's like, but like, what's the fee on that? And like, how is that? That's just one of the ways that your money is being siphoned away from you. I hate those services. I think it might have been Perfect Union that did a little vignette about a woman who had just been caught in those cycles for like ever. It's like the new payday loan. Like, once upon a time, you had to get dressed, put on shoes, get yourself together and walk down to or drive to the payday loan people and take out a payday loan. But now the payday loan is on your phone and you can take a payday loan from the comfort of your bed. That is a major issue. Um, so I'm concerned. I hope that we really, like, from like an economic perspective, I hope that we can move towards moving away from that like instant gratification, mindless. Sometimes it's like mindless spending, or it's just not even, it's not prioritizing putting your money to work for you. I think sometimes people think, well, I have so little. Yeah, but like, if people are siphoning $5 and $10 from you every paycheck, like, they do it to millions of people. But what if you could put that $5 or $10 to work for yourself? What if you can invest that $5 to $10 into your own assets, into something that will increase your value, like your net worth? Even if you just sit it in an account and you got $5 more than you had last week. Well, I mean, if we all did that, there would be a lot of industries that would have to come down to size because they wouldn't be having this like millions and billions of dollars to, extract more and compound. And then people would have like more financial viability, like themselves, you know? I don't know. I'm still kind of working out exactly how to present that or how to convey my thoughts on it. But that's just to share like what has been on my mind, not only just personally, but community wise. Those are the things that's important to me. You know, coming into the wealth space, what's important to me is talking to people about keeping their wealth, keeping their money, prioritizing themselves, and thinking about what are like doing an audit, even as like a personal audit, like what are the mindless ways that like money, any, especially you can start with recurring. Is there any recurring fees or things that's coming out of your money regularly that don't have to? Is there anything like that? That's a good place to start that can be eliminated. And then another tool that I talked about on my channel a while ago was automatic savings. I mean, when I implemented automatic savings, my savings goals, I was getting to them a lot faster and more efficiently. Instead of like, you get to this month, you have bills, you have your recurring bills, you have things that pop up that you weren't expecting, things like that happen. And I think what I would do, which I think a lot of people might do, is just like you have in your mind, like, I want to save X amount of dollars a month. Like, it would be great if I could save X amount of dollars a month. Or maybe you don't even have an amount in mind, but you're like, I should be saving because that's a good thing to save, right? And then like you get to the end of the month or you're in the middle of the month and maybe you save, maybe you don't, maybe you put some money in the savings account, but then you transfer it right back to the checking and like, you don't have like an automate, like you don't have a concrete way to get to where you're trying to go. And my thing is this, it's not about the amount that you save. It's about the discipline of saving. Like that was a game changer for me. And when I talk to people about their savings, I think one of the biggest hesitancies that people have is that the number isn't big as they want it to be. And it's like, well, I only have like an extra $10 or I only have an extra $25. My, but if you can consistently save $25 a month and do it automatically, that is more valuable to you than saving $500 from your tax refund and then saving nothing else for the rest of the year. Because it's about discipline, it's about habit, and it's about commitment to yourself. Because every time that automatic savings, that transfer goes into your savings account, you are telling the universe, I care about my future. I care about my children and my grandchildren. I have aspirations for the future. I wanted this. I wanted that. I'm saving for a house. I'm saving for a business. I'm saving for an emergency, so that I'm not caught off guard because things happen. Cars break down, tires pop, you get sick, you got to take off of work, whoop de whoop, stuff happens. Life happens. Your hot water heater blows out, this, that, or the third happens, a pipe bust, something. Life always happens. And um, when you can put money into, I have different buckets. Um, I have like a vacation fund, I have an emergency fund, and I have like just a reserve fund. Um, and I I like to know when I'm saving it, what am I saving it for? But when you put the money into a bucket and you give it a purpose, you are constantly affirming within yourself your ability to choose yourself, choose your family, put yourself first, and make things easier for yourself in the future. So, future you will look back at you 1 year ago and be like, thank you. I appreciate you. you know? So, you're doing it for the future you, doing the savings. So, I really believe in it. I really, really do. And like I said, it's an affirmation. It's like an affirmation in action. So, you're saying it and you're doing it at the same time, which is more powerful. It's all like a walking meditation. People that like do yoga and meditate or walk and meditate, like they're moving their bodies and they're mentally or spiritually, trying to connect. It's the same thing when you have an intention about yourself and investing in yourself and your future, and then you save $5. Just in the action of saving the $5, you have put your affirmation into action. So I'm a big proponent of it. And like the biggest thing that I usually have to break people down or, try to really encourage them is like, please don't focus on the amount. You don't have to feel ashamed if all you have to save is $5 right now or $10 right now. Because these companies that's taking 5, 10, and $15 out of your account, they're going to take what they can get. They're not usually hitting you over the head with two, three, $400. They're weaseling out small convenience fees, so small you don't even notice that you're paying it. You don't even notice that you're paying it. But I think we just live in a time where we have to be very vigilant. We have to be like, we have to scrutinize our statements and scrutinize our receipts. Make sure you're looking at stuff as they're scanning it. Look at it, be very present with what's going on and making sure that the things are lining up where they're supposed to line up. If people got to take something off, let them take it off or go check the price. Hey, whatever. People got to wait. They got to wait. But every dollar that you can put into work for yourself, that's that's where it's at. That's where it's at. So, anywho, thank you so much for tuning in. I probably need to go in and try to erase the old lives. It took me forever to figure out a platform on how to how to get on here, and ultimately, I just had to get on my phone, so I couldn't get on my laptop. So, thank you for tuning in, and I will be back at some point. Peace and love.